You want a podcast? Welcome to Flute 360, the podcast that reminds you everything is connected. I'm Dr. Heidi K. Begay, flutist, educator, creative entrepreneur, and follower of Christ. Here, we explore the full circle, the 360 of your life as a musician. Because who you are as a person shapes who you are as an artist. And the lessons you learn outside the practice room are just as vital as the hours with your flute in hand. From health and spiritual growth to artistry and career fulfillment, this space is where it all intersects. Come as you are. There's a seat for you at the Flute 360 table. Today's episode is episode 345, and it's titled The Music Teacher's Playbook, Proven Strategies to Start, Grow, and Thrive in Your Private Studio, Part 2. Why do some studios fill up with eager students while others struggle just to book one new lesson? I hear it all the time. One teacher told me she's brand new to town and keeps refreshing her inbox, hoping for inquiries that never come. Another said she's been teaching for years but still can't seem to grow past 5 students. It's frustrating, exhausting, and it can make even the most passionate musician question their calling. But what if growth wasn't about luck? What if it was about clarity and connection? In part 2 of our Music Teacher's Playbook series, Dr. Katherine Emeneth and Nathalie Simper walk us through proven recruitment strategies that actually work in today's world. Grab your notebook, listen in, and when you're ready for hands-on guidance, schedule your one-on-one with Katherine through the link in the show notes below. Hey there, 360er. Thank you for coming back to part 2 with the amazing Dr. Katherine Emeneth and Mrs. Nathalie Simper. We are talking about the real tea, showing you behind the scenes, behind the curtains of real stories, real testimonies, real conversations that we have with our clients in terms of what to do with the amazing hard work that you put into your music degree. What are your options? How can you be creatively and financially fulfilled? So if you have not checked out part 1, go back and listen to that. But today we are going to give you a lay of the land of just the industry. What are our options and how teaching isn't second best? It's not just plan B, but it can actually be something that you build with a lot of pride, with a lot of fulfillment, and for you to get to use the skills and talents that you've honed oh so well these past 10 years. So thank you again, ladies, for being here. And let's start with that. Let's start with the foundation of, demystifying this falsehood that, I need that traditional job. I need to be that flute professor, music professor. I need to be in that orchestral seat to have a dependable, reliable paycheck that I get every 2 weeks. And we're highlighting that because a lot of our clients come to us and say, oh my gosh, I can't build my own thing. What does that mean financially wise for me? Like, I need that stability. And what we have seen among the 3 different paths that we have all encountered as individuals, we have had traditional jobs. We have built our own entrepreneurial path. We have even worked at TJ Maxx. And in any market, anywhere across the industry, it does not matter. Financial stability is a myth, right? Because you can get fired from TJ Maxx tomorrow. And then what are you going to do, right? You can lose those students, but within your studio, but what are you going to do? Like, you need to put on that CEO cap and have the right tools in your toolbox to make it a possibility for you to have and build your own career and your own path for those creative and financial fulfillments. So I'm rambling, but the point is, like, we want to, again, give you that permission slip that you can build your own thing. And you don't have to necessarily like strive for that traditional, I'm using air quotes, that traditional paycheck, because, you know, unfortunately, those aren't always standard or locked in either. So what are the things in the conversations you have, Katherine, with your clients when it comes to, oh my gosh, you know, building my own thing that feels financially unstable, right? I would much rather get that traditional pay stub. What are the conversations that you have with this person?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the first thing that we do talk about is, okay, while we're building your studio and your business, let's go get that job at TJ Maxx. Let's go get that job working at Starbucks, because it doesn't make you less of a musician. It doesn't make you less of an educated person. You have to have money. You have to have financial stability. It doesn't matter if you have a doctorate or not. It doesn't mean anything in this regard. You have to make sure that you're covering your bases. Does building your own thing take time? Yeah. Do you have to pay money up front and invest in it for it to go? Yeah. Does it take a long time? Uh-huh. But not as long as you might think. We're talking more in the months to years thing instead of the like decades, is what a lot of people feel like. So the first conversations that we have are, reality. Like, yeah, it's going to take you a little bit. And yeah, you do have to have some financial stability to help you get through this time, to have a cushion, to have somewhere to land as you build that thing. When I was building my online company, I was doing lots of different things. I was tutoring people. I had an adjunct teaching professor job. I was teaching lessons at a middle school after school, like in the instrument storage room, which I feel like most of us have done, with a doctorate, right? With college teaching experience, with international flute competition experience, whatever. You do what you have to do when you're building it. And as far as the financial security goes, once you build it and get your system locked in and you have that steady idea and that steady system going, you are basically creating that stability yourself by looking at your multifacetedness of your career. So if you're a private lessons teacher, part of your income is coming from the lessons. Maybe part of your income is coming from running like a community ensemble for students in your area. Maybe part of that is coming from doing something online, or maybe part of that is coming from, being a part-time assistant for a band program. So it's very diverse, and you learn how to dial those things in to lock them in. The scoop of the traditional path and the job paycheck, the reliability of that is that, like we talked about in part one, unfortunately, a lot of music departments are vanishing. And so, and a lot of times the applied professor positions are going adjunct. And so the adjunct pay is probably less than what you would get paid hourly for running your own private studio. So it is definitely something to think about. I think that the reason why so many musicians want that traditional job instead of making something on their own is because it is perceived as successful. It is perceived as you have made it. It does not feel, it is more of that, apply for a job, interview, get the job, and then have your title. Whereas when you do your own thing, you don't really are through an institution. You don't really have a title, and it doesn't feel as real in a way as it does if you have that going through that institution. So I think that's why we crave that, why we want to have that, even though we know it's hard, even though we know that it's next to impossible. But we feel like if we have that, that is some sense of security and identity, and that we're set for life. But that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other part of that too is that by having a job in like from an institution, there's a structure already in place to handle all of the things that encompass working there. Like you get to focus on teaching or whatever your responsibilities are in that job, and then you receive your paycheck. But there are so many steps in between from you showing up and doing the work and then getting your paycheck. There are all these people behind the scenes in that structure. And so when you talk about building your own private studio, there is no structure. Mm-hmm. The only structure that exists is the one that you have to create. And if you don't know what you need to do, you don't have the skill set in order to build that up, it's a scary, terrifying thing, because you're like, well, I just want to be able to play the flute, or I just want to be able to teach my students, and then now you have to start thinking about all of these things that you weren't taught in your music degree and you had never considered before. So the appeal, there is like this appeal of getting a job at an orchestra, getting a job with a college institution, because they're going to fill in all of those things that you haven't learned how to do, and that sometimes you don't want to have to do those things, but that's just like how it is now.
The nature of the game. Yeah. 1000%. And that perception, ooh, you guys hit it right on the head. That's a real thing, because I can't speak for other cultures, but like in the Western civilization, everything is tied up with your identity, with that title, with the salary, with the perks, with the prestige. And if I could go back in time and like nurture and console younger Dr. Heidi, where I wasn't getting that title and I felt devalued and I felt like I wasn't good enough. Oh, I must be crap, and not to get that position. That is so not true. It is not true at all. And the reason being is everything we talked about in part 1, but also like the counseling part, the nurturing part I would want to give her is I almost feel more proud of my doctorate because I am doing field study work. Mm-hmm. I am in the field. I am learning how to build relationships. I am learning the back end. I am learning how to build out my own website. I am learning what that sales, AKA invitation call looks like. I know what marketing looks like. And just like you two ladies, we had to throw ourselves into the deep end and learn how to swim and keep afloat. Not from, we all read, we're all readers, but not from theory, not from reading these books and going, oh, okay, but actually being thrown into the deep end and going, okay, how am I going to swim? Let's make this happen so I can stay afloat. And that seems, and you said it, Nathalie, it seems terrifying, right? Because if you threw me into the deep end and I'm not a swimmer, then it's like, oh, shoot, I don't want to drown. But once you start kicking your legs and moving your arms and realizing dead man's float, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. You know what I mean? And then at some point, you're going to need, and I wish I would have had a Nathalie and a Katherine 15 years ago, but you're going to need at some point, you can only go so far with what you do know and from the experiences that you do have and that you create for yourself. And yes, get in there, don't sit on the sidelines, get in the field and play the game. But at some point, you're going to need that football coach to show you how to throw that ball that much better, right? You're going to need that coach at some point, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not that you have failed. It's like what Nathalie said in part 1, filling in the void, filling in the gaps of the knowledge that you had not yet acquired. So if you call out going like this and, flaring your arms and legs about going, hey, Katherine, Nathalie, can you throw me a life buoy so I don't drown? That's the beautiful part of lifting each other up and giving each other the tools in order to stay afloat, and not just stay afloat to survive, but to thrive. And then to have enough oxygen to go, oh yeah, and then hop onto that rowboat and then hop onto the speedboat. And then next thing you know, you're like in your yacht. So I love that water analogy.
That's good.
Yeah. So like, you're not a failure. And I love what you said about perception. And we perceive, especially here in these, this Western culture of going, oh my gosh, titles. But actually doing your own thing and building out things and knowing and learning about all those systems I just painted out, I am more proud of my terminal degree for those reasons, because you're in the weeds. And then while you're in the weeds, you meet other farmers and you learn how to, man, I'm all for analogies today. And while you're in the weeds, and I'm like, oh, look at Farmer Katherine and Nathalie. How are you building your crop better? And we can talk and help and exchange seeds and water and sunlight. And yeah, so anything that you're thinking along those lines, if you want to add to the swimming
analogy.
farm analogy, go for it.
Yeah, it's like the other folks are just in the desert, right? And they're not willing to take a step into the weeds. They just want to stay right there where there's nothingness and hope that they're going to come upon an oasis.
Okay.
And on a paradise, right? How was that? That was pretty good.
Ooh, that was good. I'm loving this. We could continue this all day long.
Because
I think like, to the desert analogy, if you're taking people who are used to living in the desert and you're telling them, hey, there's this like oasis where there's like all this water, there are all these crops, right? There's everything there that you need. But it's something that is completely different than what they know. Most people would rather stick with the problems that they know than the problems that they can't anticipate or they can't give a name to. So in the instance of seeking out these, what we perceive to be really stable jobs, we know that it's a volatile market. We know the struggles and the scarcity of finding these university jobs. And yet so many of us will continue to go for them, rejection after rejection after rejection, because the alternative is creating something in a space where you don't know what the drawbacks are. You don't know the challenges you're going to face. You can only think or imagine them. They're just concepts in your mind. And because they're not concrete, they're not set in real life because you haven't pursued that path, then you're like, well, yeah, the jobs are disappearing and this is just what I know. And this is what my teacher did and my teacher's teacher and so on and so forth. So that I feel like that's why a lot of people stick it out a lot longer than maybe they would in other contexts.
Do you think it's because us as musicians, we are told to go as an individual and do independent practice in that practice room for 4 to 5 hours? And we are in this almost I know we play in chamber and we play in orchestra and play collaboratively with flute and piano, but we are in air quote isolated practice and it's independent and you figure it out and get your chops up to recording performance ready. So do you think then coming out of that practice room and going, oh, I really can't get, the end of the note and the end of the phrase note to be in tune and not go flat, like to ask for help? It almost feels like then it's an attack of like then and questioning your ability. So when we don't know, yeah, you get it. So do we resort to that because of our training?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yeah, in some respects, I think classical musicians are very result driven. We are given the formula of if you practice X hours a day or you do XYZ, then you're going to get that job. You're going to land that competition. You're going to get whatever accolade or whatever goal that you're working towards. And we're not given much else. We're given that one path to walk, and we see everybody else walking that same path. And there's that other path that is not as well worn and that can give financial security. It can give a creative fulfillment and personal enjoyment, but we don't know the process. We don't always know the process to get us that result. We see people who build their own studios and have a wait list and are doing all of these incredible things, but we don't see the process behind that. I remember when I ran into Katherine's ad for Playbook and thinking, like, oh my goodness, things must have come so easily to her because she's so knowledgeable in this, that she's so specialized in what she knows about this. And when I became part of the course and started learning from her, I realized, wow, like she struggled just like I did, or she struggled in other ways that I couldn't even have imagined having to go through or to experience. Katherine was illuminating that path for me of, hey, I did all of these difficult things. I struggled and I dealt with all of these failures. And I don't want other people to have to experience any more of that than they have to experience. It doesn't mean that I never experienced those things after learning from her and implementing these things in my own studio. It just meant that I knew that there were other people traveling that path. And so I was like, okay, it's going to be okay, because I know that there is a path, even if I don't know what that path looks like.
Ooh, I love that. And that's why we're having these conversations. So like, obviously I am 1000% any Flute 360 listener listening to this and saying, what do I need to do to be coached by Nathalie and Katherine in Playbook? That's why we're having this conversation, to say that this resource and these people and these coaches are available, not to hurt as bad as we did, so that way we can bridge that gap for you so you can find that transformation that much faster and quicker. So we're highlighting Playbook, but in the same vein, we are highlighting these conversations that happen, what you just said, Nathalie, that happen in Playbook. So because I know you look up to Katherine and you have so much respect and regard for who she is and what she's built. And when we see that, sometimes we put, and rightfully so, Katherine is on our pedestal, but when we see these people and we put them on pedestals because of the branding, the logos, the fonts, the content, and we got 9,000 followers, we're like, oh, well, that's easy for her. But when you pull back the curtains and you realize and you have these real conversations, dropping down the real fears, the real hurts and pains, then you realize she's human just like me. She had to fall on her face a bunch of times in order to be like, okay, I'm kind of, walking, jogging a little bit. Oh, and I fall on again. I pick myself up and do it again. And let me show you the system. Let me show you the process of what it took me to achieve that goal. So that way Jane, Joe, Nathalie's can have it that much better than I had in my season. But that's why we have these conversations in podcasting, in social media, to put down that, not that we do, because all three of us are very vulnerable in our businesses, but to lay down that facade that maybe people are putting up of going, ooh, look at the logo on the door, and that reminds me of a 360 when I got to learn about her and her mindset through a flute shop. She was like, oh, I couldn't knock on that door for a sponsorship because there's a logo on the door and it's laminated. I'm like, yeah, girl, but 20 years ago, that flute shop started in somebody's apartment with no money and they were negative in the bank account. They're a human being. And when we normalize this and we normalize these conversations and the journey and the blood, sweat, and tears, then we realize, oh, we're not much different. So showcasing the process and showcasing these stories is so paramount to you, the listener's success.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, music school needs to change, but I also understand it from their perspective too. There's only so much you can put into a full-on curriculum, right? And there are wonderful programs who are trying to do entrepreneurship classes and professors who are making their students do all of these projects that will be helpful and useful. It's just so tricky, I think, because like we've talked about before, most people who are hired to be university professors have never had to do the things that we do. So their frame of reference for teaching other people how to do it is Google, or asking one of us to come in and do a 1-hour lecture on something, which is great to expose and do that. And so, I feel like we've come a long way in that regard. It's just a completely different beast. And something that I love that Nathalie has always said has recently said, is you can't really major in private studio building. And that's a shame.
I saw that reel and I was like, mouth agape in the best way possible. I was like,
Yes.
yeah, she nailed it right on the head. Yes, that is the verbiage that I was craving to see and to hear. So thank you for that, Nathalie. So speaking of that, so going and piggybacking off of that idea. Okay, most curriculums, they may or may not teach music studio building, right? And if they do, like you said, Katherine, it may be a music business 101 course. I had to take one semester in my undergraduate year in Tucson, Arizona on music business 101. And it was how to put together your CD album. Pretty much was the entire semester. There was nothing about networking. There was nothing about studio building. They glazed over it. It was theory. They brought in a couple guest speakers, and then that was it. And it's like, okay, that's going to get me far. That's my sarcastic voice. So now that this 360er has graduated, they have knocked on 100 to 200 doors. They keep hearing no after no after no. And they've decided, okay, I'm going to build my own thing. Can we talk about the reality and the expectations that this person could possibly see? And I know all three of us had to shift and have this paradigm shift for our own paths. The other thing I want to unlock and unpack is that CEO mindset. Because if you just show up thinking like, oh, this is going to be, like something fun or a hobby, you're going to get hobby results. But if you're willing to pay back your student loans, your credit card debt, buy a house, put food in the fridge, you're going to need business results. So sitting in that CEO chair, you're going to show up differently. The way you build out your studio is just going to be a whole different thing than, this idea of I do this for fun.
Mm-hmm. When I was starting my studio, I didn't even think of it as a studio. I thought of myself as just a teacher. It was just one of the things that I was doing in addition to performing and doing gigs. And at one point I was working at a federal student loan servicing company. And I hadn't considered myself a real educator and a business owner. Katherine was actually the one to help flip that switch of, yeah, everything that I'm doing in this is part of being a business owner. It is more than just a teacher. This is a career path. This is a full-blown job. And it's something that I am creating on my own terms. So I absolutely am a CEO in that respect. And that's something that, even now, 5 years after being in Playbook, that's something that I come back to all the time, like whether I'm struggling or successful, that I remind myself, like, this is part of the job, is being the CEO, is calling the shots and taking the wins and taking the losses and dealing with all of that. And Katherine, I think, does a really great job of highlighting that element with not only in my experience, but with the clients that we work with, to shift from I'm just a musician or I'm just a teacher to I'm a musician and a teacher and I'm a CEO.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people, when they decide they're going to start teaching privately, they feel one of two ways. One way is, okay, I paid all this money for my music degree. I can play the snot out of the Nielsen concerto. Students will just find me. And my applied teacher said, just teach a few lessons, while you're taking your auditions, And then they have that mindset going in of just put a couple flyers up in a band room, and then they will obviously come and flock to you. Then the other mindset that a lot of people have is, I've never taught a beginner. I've never had to write a policy before. I've never collected payment before. I have no idea how to organize a studio recital. And they kind of feel like this deflating feeling, or start having these excuses of why they can't do the thing. And so, we have all of these different types of folks and how they approach private teaching in multiple different ways. And we've seen everything in between that too. People who are saying like, all right, I'm ready to go. Teach me everything I need to know. Or people that feel ashamed that they don't know how to, create a sales funnel. And I'm like, dude, you just spent like 6 years in music school. Of course you don't know how to create a sales funnel. Let us show you how to do it, And so you get a lot of different mindsets of people who are coming in and wanting to build a private studio because they haven't had that backbone of exactly how to do it. And yeah, just like all three of us know, there are certain things in business that every business has to have. But something we try to do, at least in our business, is we really try to make every studio unique, because every studio is unique depending on that teacher. And what we do a lot of work with is we unlock and uncover what it is about that teacher that makes them a big, gigantic magnet. And then that is what we call branding. And we explode that everywhere to help them have a very, very specific targeted approach for when they do talk about their private studio, so that it does become a lot more strategic and a lot more involved, and that they have a clear path instead of just feeling like that they're flinging spaghetti on the wall with their poster that says, I'm available for flute lessons, when the 11-year-old kid on day 2 of band doesn't even know what a flute lesson is, you know? So we see lots of different people who come in, and we love helping them put these things into place that they didn't know that they needed foundationally to be a successful studio owner and to be an amazing, enthusiastic, and genuine teacher.
I love all of that. Yes, 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 and yes. And I say this with all the love in the world. Well, let me back up. First thought, you only know what you know, right? Yes. Like if you've been playing the snot out of Nielsen, you know those licks and runs and everything. Okay. But there's an art and a science, just like there is to your practicing and your performing. There's an art and a science to your business building too. There's an art and a science to your unique thumbprint of a studio. And what can we do? I love that word magnet, right? Like a beautiful fly to a flame. What's going to draw your flies to your flame? You know, and who comes into Katherine's studio and Heidi's studio and Nathalie's studio could look completely different. And rightfully so, because we have unique skill sets like a snowflake. And what gets Nathalie up in the morning teaching a certain type of flutist may be different than who's in my studio, and vice versa. And that's the beautiful thing about it. I don't have to teach kinder flutists. And guess what? I don't want to. I love little ones. I have nieces who are 5, 6 years old. Me teaching them how to blow into a head joint makes me want to cringe, because that's not how God made me. God made me to teach, flutists who are in gap years and post-graduation. That's what I thrive. And I think all of us are saying the same thing. You don't have to look like the next flute studio teacher. Don't try to, and that's the other thing that makes me cringe is like, I teach, like the post saying, I have openings in my studio. And I'm saying this with all the love in the world. Yeah. Where I see the copy or the wording, I teach all ages and all abilities. Yes. And I'm like, girl, no, you don't. You can. But if I was recruiting students into my Flute 360 studio and I was really excited about those kinder flutists, guess what? The language I use for a 5 to 10-year-old is much, much, much different than a flutist who is in their 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
They're worlds apart. And they have different
module
goals.
1 in Playbook.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You just can't, Yeah. And even if you did, that copy is not going to convert, and that your person who you are trying to attract to your flame, right? You need to speak specifically to that one individual and find 10, 20 more of those Sarahs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that something that works really well with big companies and their products, like they're very specific about the people that they're speaking to so that they can optimize and maximize their profits. Mm-hmm. If, you are into hiking, then you're going to lean towards a certain kind of product versus if you're like, I'm more of a glamping kind of girl, you're not going to be using the same equipment or in the same way. And musicians are, we're just in a lot of that scarcity mindset. It just seeps into a lot of facets of being a musician. And we think, well, I can't be picky. I have to say yes to anyone who's willing to come through the door in the studio. And that's not how businesses work. And, you can be picky. And yes, there are seasons where you're going to open the door a little bit wider, and seasons where you can be a little bit more picky or specific about the kind of student that you're seeking. But if you are open to any and all, and you're like, I'm just going to say yes, and no matter what, even if I know that there's a better teacher out there for them, even if our personalities or I'm not the right fit for their learning needs, then it's going to lead to burnout. It's going to lead to disinterest in how you operate in your studio and showing up to all of these lessons. And so it doesn't create an ideal environment for you or for the student either.
Oh, yes, 1000%. Finding that win-win. And it's okay if you accidentally revert into, because I'm guilty of that even still today. And I've been teaching professionally for 15 years. When I have that consultation and that free trial lesson of going, okay, let's see if we're a good fit. It's like that little one comes in through the door. So like, okay, I could love this. I'll make this happen. And then 4, 5, 6 months later, I'm like, oh, I knew it. Like I should have really passed this contact information to my colleague in Forney in Dallas, Texas. And you try it on, and it's okay to try that shoe on for size for a little bit. But if you know it's pinching you consistently, like I have the widest feet ever. You cannot put me into a beautiful glass slipper like Cinderella. It ain't gonna happen. I need like duck shoes. So like you can try to put on that glass slipper for a while, but if it's pinching and you are feeling frustrated or burnt out, take off that slipper and try on some like actually really cozy wool slippers, not a glass slipper. And that's okay. Here's another analogy. Try on your different shoes. Different shoes will fit different people and sizes and widths and all that jazz. So with that slipper analogy, no two studios are going to look alike. And, it could look like a glass slipper for Katherine. It could be a wool sock slipper for Nathalie. And maybe it's duck slippers for me, But with all that being said, we've covered a lot today, ladies. So as we're wrapping up this awesome conversation in part 2, is there a piece of encouragement that you want to give for that or to that Flute 360er who knows that they want to build out that studio for themselves? They want to build their own path and they are just sitting on the fence. They're a little reluctant. Is there something that you find yourself saying quite a bit in your coaching calls where you see that aha moment in that client going, ooh, okay, I can do this?
Yeah, totally. I think that the stress and the anxiety lowers the more you do it. So of course it's going to be scary at first. Yeah, you're facing what could be, not instant gratification. But if you really want something, start taking the steps to make it happen. And the more steps you take, the closer that will get. And as long as you're doing it in a way that's authentic to you, where you're not making yourself into a cookie cutter or what you think other people want, then it's going to be successful. And it's hard to do that. And that's why we do what we do, because we help people unlock what that looks like for themselves and tell them about how their studio and how their teaching is going to be different, even if they're in a saturated environment, right? So every person, there's enough students to go around for every single person. And all of these things that we're talking about, the type of studio teacher you are, the type of shoe that you wear, that all doesn't happen immediately. It is a process. So you can't expect to have everything figured out first and then start. It's the other way around. You figure it out through building something and working towards something.
And to piggyback off of Katherine, perception is everything. It's not always going to be easy to do these things, to take those steps. And you're not always going to get it right the first time that you take those steps. But focusing on your your goal, your mission, your purpose in doing all of this, it's going to make these challenges more manageable because it's going to be worth it to you. You're going to see, well, yes, I'm struggling with this now, or I have this problem I need to figure out and to solve. But you know what all of that hard work and putting that effort into solving that problem is going to bring you. It's going to bring you that studio that is uniquely yours, that fits you perfectly, and has the students that really make you excited to show up every single day. So, if you're wondering what you can do in order to make those steps easier or more manageable in the moment, just make sure that your perception, that you're focused on your mission.
Oh, beautifully said. Yes. And you could not have said that any better either. And then once you find that glove or that shoe, you're like, oh, this feels like home. This feels nice. And it's exciting. I love that. Thank you so much, ladies. And thank you to the Flute 360 listener for tuning in. And do not miss part 3, which goes out tomorrow. And we have got more goodies, and we're spilling more tea and giving you the empowerment for you to really feel creatively and financially fulfilled on your musical path. And until next time. Today's conversation was all about mindset, about seeing your studio not just as a side gig, but as a reflection of your purpose and potential. When you start investing in yourself and shifting your perspective, everything changes. Your confidence, your students, and the trajectory of your music business. If you're ready to take that next courageous step, click the link in the show notes to schedule your call with Dr. Katherine Emeneth. She'll listen, guide you through where you are, and help you grow the studio you were meant to lead. Let's talk about Flute.